peace and security around the world.
The report to the UN Security Council says Islamic terror groups have taken advantage of disruptions caused by the COVID pandemic. Officials say in Islamist strongholds in Iraq and Syria, the groups have significant hidden financial reserves estimated between $25 and $50 million.
He was one of the first
evacuating some personnel from its embassy in Kabul, and an additional 3,000 American troops will be sent to help.
Our first responsibility has always been protecting the safety and the security of our citizens serving in Afghanistan and around the world.
The State Department maintains diplomatic work will continue at the embassy, adding that the move shouldn't be seen as encouraging the Taliban, but it comes as Afghan forces are collapsing even faster than U.S. military leaders thought possible just a few months ago when President Joe Biden ordered a full withdrawal by the end of this month. The Pentagon had kept about 650 troops in Afghanistan to support U.S. diplomatic security, and officials stressed the new deployments are a temporary mission, focused only on the embassy drawdown and helping accelerate visa processing for Afghan allies.
As the State Department has said, they're going to try to complete this reduction of their personnel by the end of this month. And these troops are being ordered in to help facilitate that purpose, that mission along that timeline. I won't speculate beyond August 31st as to what the footprint's going to look like or how many troops are going to be there and what they're going to be doing.
And as I alluded to, the situation in Afghanistan continues to get worse. Just Thursday, the Taliban captured the country's second and third largest cities and a strategic provincial capital. The seizure of Kandahar and Herat marks the biggest prizes yet for the Taliban, who have taken 12 of Afghanistan's 34 provincial capitals as part of a week-long blitz. The capture of the city of Ghazni, meanwhile, cuts off a crucial highway linking the Afghan capital with the country's southern provinces, which similarly find themselves under assault. While Kabul itself isn't directly under threat yet, the losses and the battles elsewhere further tighten the grip of a resurgent Taliban, who are estimated to now hold over 2/3 of the country. Afghans have been forced to flee their homes since the end of May. There have been fears that the Taliban would again impose their brutal, strict, and repressive interpretation of Islam, forbidding girls an education and women the right to work or even travel outside of their home unaccompanied by a male relative. They also carried out public executions, chopped off the hands of thieves, and stoned women they accused of adultery. 80% of those displaced are women and children, but experts contend there may be some hope if the Taliban do regain power.
Could it go back to the way it was 25 years ago? I just can't see that happening. You can't uneducate millions of people. I will say, though, being able to, if they're back behind walls and not, able to go out as much, at least they can now educate their cousins and their neighbors and their own children in a way that couldn't have happened 25 years ago. See that?
Desperation they have to be hanging on the side of an airplane, basically preferring death over what's going to come to them.
It's a painful scene that played out at Kabul's main airport. Afghans desperate to get out of the country as commercial flights were canceled.
Everyone I know is either in hiding or just trying to stay at home.
Ashia Sharifi says her friends, family, and all those who fought for Western ideals for the last 2 decades are now terrified of what's to come. Sharifi is a U.S. immigration attorney who was born in Afghanistan. She spent several years working in the country, focusing on issues like immigration and gender justice alongside other activists. Last time she was there, she saw hope that things would change.
And I remember hearing these young boys and children laughing and singing. And my friend who had been there throughout the years had said, we didn't get to do this during the Taliban. There was no laughing, there was no singing. It was like being covered in darkness.
Bahar Meher came to the U.S. last year on a special immigrant visa available to Afghans who helped the U.S. during the war. He, too, has been worried about his family and says they're waiting for the worst.
We had a common enemy, and still that enemy is at large. That enemy is taking over of the country, and those radical forces are now threatening the lives of millions of Afghans.
There are tens of thousands of special immigrant visa applicants who are now stuck. The International Rescue Committee in Atlanta, the same group which helped Meher get resettled in the U.S., says it's been receiving a lot of calls for help.
How do I help my mother, my father, my cousin, my siblings, my friends who aren't necessarily SIV holders, but we know what awaits if they remain in Afghanistan, and right now we don't have a lot of information to be able to share with them for a pathway out.
The IRC in Atlanta has helped resettle about 900 Afghans over the last 20 years.
The Afghan president leaving the country over the weekend. He's now confirmed to be in the United Arab Emirates.
Tonight, Governor Kemp has opened the door to letting refugees.
Problems.
We're aware of congestion around the airport. We are working closely with the Department of Defense to facilitate safe and orderly access for consular processing on the airport compound. The United States military is undertaking a gargantuan airlift operation right now. That itself is a major undertaking.
With an August 31st deadline looming, tens of thousands still need to be airlifted from the country. In many cases, the Taliban cannot read the documents that those cleared to leave have, while others are being blocked by Afghans that don't have papers. In a hopeful sign, however, the State Department says that 6,000 people were cleared for evacuation Thursday in boarded military flights. That would mark a major increase from recent days. Only about 2,000 passengers were flown out on each of the past 2 days, but the limiting factor has been available evacuees, not aircraft. Efforts were underway to speed up processing, including adding State Department consular officers to verify paperwork. Additional entry gates have also been opened.
We are going to do as much as we can for as long as we can, and our first priority is the safe repatriation of the American people.
And yet, at the current rate, qualified for and seeking evacuation by August 31st. President Joe Biden said Wednesday he would ensure no American was left behind, even if that meant staying beyond August. Meanwhile, in an exclusive interview with ABC News' George Stephanopoulos, Biden continued to defend the pullout, saying there are other threats.
Al-Qaeda, ISIS, they metastasize. There's a significantly greater threat to the United States from Syria. There's a significant greater threat from East Africa. There's a significant greater threat to other places in the world than it is from the mountains of Afghanistan. And we have maintained the ability to have an over-the-horizon capability to take them out.
And that tells you that it's safe to leave.
No, that tells me that we should be focusing on where the threat is the greatest.
Used against Afghans, journalists, and activists by the Taliban. The group has taken control of the country and is cracking down on dissidents.
We have a weak president now who has unleashed the Taliban on this country.
First reported by the Wall Street Journal and confirmed by Fox News last month, 24 State Department officials at the Kabul embassy warned Secretary of State Antony Blinken the Afghan government would rapidly collapse as U.S. troops withdrew.
There was nothing that we had seen that would indicate a total collapse of the government in 11 days. This is a very fluid situation, remains very fluid. Things certainly happen faster than we anticipated.
The U.S. now has 5,200 troops in the area to help evacuate thousands of Americans and allies.
There are no hostile interactions right now between American forces and the Taliban, and we want to keep it that way.
The military has the ability to fly out between 5,000 and 9,000 a day, but far fewer have actually been able to leave because of Taliban checkpoints.
Afghanistan is Taliban is terrorist.
And violence outside the Kabul airport.
Living in here is very difficult for us.
Members of Congress are receiving virtual classified briefings on the situation, with more planned for after recess. In Washington, Lauren Blanchard, Fox 5 News Edge at 11.
Erupts outside of the airport in Kabul as civilians crouch near the ground. Mothers hoist babies over walls and barbed wire, handing their children to British and American soldiers. For foreigners who have the correct paperwork, leaving Kabul is proving to be extremely difficult. For many Afghans, it's nearly impossible.
Well, one of the soldiers just called me. As I said, it was a chaos. They had guns, they were shooting. They had no choice but to, move the crowd from there. So I understand that. Tear gas was firing all around. So one of them just got me inside. And I was in tears, honestly.
The Taliban maintains a perimeter around the airport, accosting people trying to enter, while U.S. troops are forced to use intercepted the group, firing into the crowd. Several people were killed during a similar demonstration in the city of Asadabad after the Taliban used violence to stop what they see as an act of opposition. Areas like Baghlan province are already adjusting to new life under the Taliban.
This province has been under Taliban control for the last 3 months. At that time, there was peace and business was good. After the Taliban took control of all of Afghanistan, we are facing difficulties in our business.
Reports do indicate military opposition to the Taliban is forming in the Panjshir Valley, though no country has publicly yet offered support. In Jerusalem, Trey Inkst, Fox News.
West was set to complete its troop withdrawal after a costly 2-decade war. The insurgents stormed across the country, capturing all major cities in a matter of days as Afghan security forces trained and equipped by the U.S. and its allies melted away. The Taliban so far have not offered any specifics on how they will lead other than say that they will be guided by the Sharia or Islamic law. Many Afghans have been hiding at home or trying to flee the country, fearful of abuses by the loosely controlled militant organization.
Erupts outside of the airport in Kabul as civilians crouch near the ground. Mothers hoist babies over walls and barbed wire, handing their children to British and American soldiers. For foreigners who have the correct paperwork, leaving Kabul is proving to be extremely difficult. For many Afghans, it's nearly impossible.
One of the soldiers just called me. As I said, it was a chaos. They had guns, they were shooting. They had no choice but to, move the crowd from there. So I understand that. Tear gas was firing all around. So one of them just got me inside. And I was in tears, honestly.
The Taliban maintains a perimeter around the airport, accosting people trying to enter, while U.S. troops are forced to use intercepted the group, firing into the crowd. Several people were killed during a similar demonstration in the city of Asadabad after the Taliban used violence to stop what they see as an act of opposition. Areas like Baghlan province are already adjusting to new life under the Taliban.
This province has been under Taliban control for the last 3 months. At that time, there was peace and business was good. After the Taliban took control of all of Afghanistan, we are facing difficulties in our business.
Reports do indicate military opposition to the Taliban is forming in the Panjshir Valley, though no country has publicly yet offered support. In Jerusalem, Trey Inkst, Fox News.
White House from Camp David tonight after reporters got the first briefing room Q&A since the Taliban took Afghanistan. We learned at least 11,000 American citizens are stranded throughout the country, now trying to make their way to the only site under U.S. control without transportation from the U.S. military. The White House again defended the withdrawal and maintained they plan for every scenario.
We were clear-eyed going in when we made this decision that it was possible that the Taliban would end up in control of Afghanistan. We were clear-eyed about that.
National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan framed the fallout in Afghanistan as an inevitable outcome of concluding 20 years of war, but said there were other forces that caused the chaos.
We communicated with American citizens for weeks, telling them to get out of the country. The Afghan government and its supporters, including many of the people now seeking to leave, made a passionate case that we should not conduct a mass evacuation lest we trigger a loss of confidence in the government.
Evidently the least confident, Afghan President Ghani, who fled the country Sunday. President Biden has not since spoken with him. The administration is instead negotiating the safe exit of Americans and possibly allies with the Taliban, now in possession of U.S. military weapons.
They were given to the Afghan National Security Forces to be able to defend themselves. At the specific request of President Ghani, certainly a fair amount of it has fallen into the hands of the Taliban, and obviously we don't have a sense that they are going to readily hand it over to us.
The White House is also managing regional impacts of the withdrawal, China exploiting the events to sow doubt among U.S. allies. The president said yesterday that China and Russia would love nothing more than to have the U.S. sink billions of dollars and stay here forever, but it seems to me that they're celebrating this. They were touting U.S. humiliation in Afghanistan and a warning to Taiwan and other allies that the U.S.
won't come for help if war breaks out. We stand by partners around the world who are subject to this kind of propaganda that Russia and China are projecting, and we're going to continue to deliver on those words with actions.
The White House says President Biden still has confidence in his intelligence teams, adding that an assessment will be conducted for lessons learned. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said President Biden takes responsibility for every action the U.S. government took, adding that his intelligence, national security, and defense teams are doing the same.
American troops cannot and should not be fighting in a war and dying in a war that Afghan forces are not willing to fight for themselves.
Military officials now focusing on getting thousands of U.S. citizens and Afghan allies out of the country. U.S. military flights to Kabul started back up Monday evening after being suspended for several hours because of safety risks. The bulk of 6,000 American troops set to arrive in the coming days.
Over the next 2 weeks, we're going to be as aggressive as we can and moving as many people as we can.
Up to 30,000 Afghan refugees could be housed on military bases like those in Wisconsin and Texas. But lawmakers are criticizing the president's judgment, saying his decision will damage America's credibility in the world.
Surely he can see what's happening on the ground in Afghanistan right now, which is the direct consequence of his ill-planned, disorganized decision to withdraw from Afghanistan.
The state
adds, I just wish we could have left with honor. Big strategic picture. They believe we had to get out. But I wonder how you respond to an Army Special Forces officer, Javier McKay. He did 7 tours. He was shot twice. He agrees with you. He says, we have to cut our losses in Afghanistan. But he adds, I just wish we could have left with honor. Who spent 6 months in Kosovo and a year in Iraq as a Navy captain and then major. I mean, as an Army major. And you know, I'm sure he had regrets coming out of Afghanistan. I mean, out of Iraq. He had regrets to how it's going, but the idea, what's the alternative? End quote. Now, we're waiting for that tape, but that's the transcript. Now, the president's son was in the Navy, not the Army. He was in the Army, not the Navy. It's not clear from that. We believe he was in the Army and not the Navy. He did not serve at Afghanistan. He served in Kosovo and Iraq. Joe Biden can't seem to remember those details. We're not attacking him. We're not telling you this with glee. We're telling you because it's true. This is the man